Wisconsin Tele Q3 presentation. Today we're going to focus on some top tips, Tableau Pulse and Tableau Conference Insights. We have two guest speakers, Jen Shepard and Celia Fryar, and we are going to have a panel as well for the Tableau Conference for people that attended the conference this year. Meet our Wisconsin leadership team. So we have Tammy, Robert, Tosh, and myself, and we have a new member, Travis. And I'll give Travis a minute to introduce himself as a new member of our team.
Yeah, I'm Travis Brown. No relation to Tammy Brown, but I'm at here in Madison, so I've done the Madison tug. I'm part of that group as well. Been in different tugs for a little over 2 years, and been working with Tableau for close to 10. I'm currently at Progressive, been there a little under 2 years. And I've been fortunate enough, they're like very into Tableau. Like we do Makeover Mondays, if you know what those are, and have a virtual extravaganza every year, virtual Viz extravaganza. And yeah, happy to be here.
Thanks, Travis. So the agenda for today, as I said, we're going to do our poll here in a second. I did our introductions. Then Jen's going to go over some top tips for tip-top tool tips. Then Celia come up the how and why on Tableau Pulse. We'll have the Tableau Conference Insights, and then stay for the end for upcoming events and giveaways. Here is the poll today. Travis, do you want to share your screen and run it, or do you want me to just pull it up?
If you could, that'd be great, because I had to switch computers.
Okay, sounds good.
Thanks.
Oh boy, hold on. Okay, I got blocked. 1 second.
I just realized that QR code takes us to the, I think the setup.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I don't see how to participate in the poll. I'll try the link, maybe.
Travis sent me this.
Hmm.
And of course, everything's freezing on me. I have the vote link for the audience, but my chat is broken.
If you want to send the link, Brady, and our message.
Right now.
Cool. We'll go ahead and share it in the chat. Thank you.
I'm going to show.
All right, everyone. Let me know if you can join the poll from that link. Just send it in chat.
It looks right. We just have to start it.
Yep.
Cool.
Give everyone a chance to join. Okay, I'll hit start, and Travis, you want to lead us through the questions?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just what is your Tableau experience? Like, how many years have you been working with Tableau?
I think I'm in the 8 years now. I started using that when I was in college.
You're aging yourself, Brady.
I know. I know.
Yeah, but it's because you're young. Shut up.
It's a good amount of difference here. I mean, anywhere from, if you're picking it up now, there's plenty of learn. Everything's, I would say, it's a lot easier than it was before. Data cleaning is a lot easier now than previous, for sure. But a lot of improvements over the years. approximately what is your location? Well, technically, I'm in Madison today, but I live in the Milwaukee area.
I just want to throw an additional question on the last one. If you want to put it in chat, what version of Tableau did you start with, if you remember?
Oh, geez.
When did they switch over to having years?
I was gonna say Robert and Jen. Now you're aging yourselves.
12.1.
Because they didn't used to have years, right? It was just a version.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to say 2019, maybe 2018, 2019. Madison representing.
Mostly Madison, yep.
Other.
Next question. Did you attend the Tableau conference? Past years, wasn't able to make it this year for myself. Definitely hard to carve out the time for the virtual, even if you plan to, because something always comes up. I will say that's probably the biggest benefit for me being in person is you are there in person, so it's easier to just disconnect for that few days and focus on trying to learn from amazing people like Jen. What industry do you work in? I don't know. Since I work in consulting, I actually work in all these industries.
Yeah, I was like, how many do I want to use? I thought these would be some of the big ones, but
All the above.
clearly picked the wrong ones. Needed to expand the other.
That's good to know. Do you use Pulse? I have it set up, but I don't think I use it as much as I could get value out of it. Seems like there's a lot of people that have not used it incorrect, or not getting the most out of it yet, Celia. And last question, are you a part of any other tugs? Madison, Jen and Robert are part of the leadership team in Madison. They run great in-person events, so well sometimes online, and then Milwaukee is in person and been there many times as well when I can make it. Join other ones as well, just been more busy recently. But
I was gonna ask, was there a Madison event this week then?
No,
what you were saying?
our next event is on September 29th.
Oh, okay. I thought you
We
said
had an internal meeting earlier this week, but it was just leadership team.
Oh,
It's
I
Madison
see.
Tug event is September 29th.
Got it.
Quick plug there.
Thanks everyone for participating. First up for our speakers, we have Jen Shepard. Jen has over 15 years of experience in social science research, design, project management, data and collection analysis, reporting, working with Wisconsin State and a variety of freelance clients. She designs and builds dashboards with Tableau and Sigma, wrangles data with Alteryx, and enjoys identifying trends and patterns in data that lead to insights. She uses her research and design skills to make data more accessible, understandable, and actionable. And I am going to let her start sharing.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hey, everybody. I'm going to share my screen here and then we will get started. All right. I'm very excited to share some of my top tips for tooltips with you. I did present this at Tableau Conference this year, my first time presenting. That was pretty wild. And it was really, really well received, and hopefully you all get a lot out of it as well. So just get my clicker organized here. Okay. So Brita just did a great intro. I will just add to that. I have been a Tableau ambassador for 4 years, and I've been a leader of the Madison Tug for coming up on 9 years. I also was previously one of the co-leads for this Tug, so it's great to be back with you all, at least temporarily. But most relevant to my presentation today, I've also been a Tableau user for over 10 years. You might have seen in the chat, I've been using Tableau since version 8.1. So these tips are things that I personally use. I live and breathe them. I use Tableau pretty much daily and have been doing so for quite a number of years. So again, I hope you get a lot out of this as well. This is specifically what I'm going to be covering. First, I'm going to go over 5 different formats or structures that your tooltips can take. Then I'm going to go over some of the features of the dialog box where you create your tooltip. I think there are at least a couple of things in there that people tend not to know what they do or maybe don't get the most out of. There's probably at least one thing in there that you are not using to its full capability. Then I'm going to actually get into Tableau Desktop, and I will show you some of the things how to do them in Tableau itself, including how to build a divider line for your tooltips and a couple of viz and tooltip nuances. And then I'm going to wrap up with 3 tips that hopefully you'll be able to remember and take with you that kind of summarize my philosophy on tooltips, even if you don't remember the specifics from today. I also want to mention that I will be making these slides available by PDF so that you don't have to furiously take notes if you don't want to. You'll have that as a resource later if you're so inclined. But before I get into all of that, I just want to share a little bit about why I personally think tooltips are so important. This is a quote from myself. I think tooltips are what gives our users, the people who use our dashboards, that context or verification, or sometimes it's really just about reassuring them that they understood the data correctly. And understanding it is key. We can't really expect our users to take action from the dashboard or from the visualization if they don't really understand what it is that they're seeing. And action can mean a lot of different things. We might be talking about a member of the leadership or your CEO or somebody making a decision based on the data, but it might just be somebody finding your viz on Tableau Public, your passion project, and feeling something about it because they understood what it is that you're trying to say. And there are more ways than just tooltips to make sure that that happens, but I do find tooltips to be one big way to provide these extra pieces of context that our users need. All right, let us start with those 5 structural options that I mentioned. So again, these are forms that your tooltip can take. So on the left here is the Tableau default. This probably looks very familiar to you. As you bring things out into your canvas, Tableau basically stacks them in the tooltip vertically like this with a label and the value. And sometimes the labels are okay, and sometimes they're kind of a mess, especially if you have something like a table calculation, as you see in my example. So on the right-hand side, this is what I call the focused tooltip. It's really just to the point. I'm just using those key pieces of information, and I'm not putting those labels in. My user is going to know that 2023 is the year. I don't need to say that this is year. And this format of tooltip works really well if you've got a user, maybe a leadership member or somebody who's checking these data regularly. They know what they're looking at. They maybe check the dashboard all the time, and they just want to quickly see what is that value. So maybe the dashboard is more focused on the high-level trends, and the tooltip is where they get the specifics. So this focused format works really well in those cases. And it just looks a lot cleaner than the default, doesn't it? The second format you can use is sentence format. So I still have those key pieces, but now I've arranged them in a sentence with words in between. And this way I can explain what's going on in the tooltip. And these are great for an audience where maybe you're not sure if they have the data experience to understand what it is they're looking at, or you don't know if they know the context of your project very well. Sentence form is really helpful in cases like that. You can still use formatting, like you can see here how I've used bold to make some of those measures and some of those words stand out. So that way, if somebody comes back to the dashboard, if they are familiar, they can see those key pieces more quickly, but it gives that additional reassurance, that additional support to somebody who might not be super familiar with the data or the viz that they're looking at. The third kind I call levels. So you can sort of think of this like if you have a document, a report or something, and you have an outline format where we're using the font type and style and weight and color and size and all of these things, as well as white space to split apart the different pieces of the tooltip. So you can see here, I've got some different colors going on. I definitely have different weights. And this helps you focus your user's eye directly to where you think the most important content is, while still giving them those additional pieces as context if needed. So you can see here, I put the coordinates for, in this case, Wisconsin, in italics and at the bottom in a lighter gray. It's there, but it doesn't grab your attention the way furniture sales with a value does. And you can see on the right-hand side what that looks like behind the scenes in the tooltip editor. There's hard returns to make white space in between the different pieces And again, I've played a lot with the different styles. The fourth kind is the dynamic tooltip. So here's where we're starting to get a little more sophisticated in terms of what you as a developer would do in creating the tooltip. And what this means is that the tooltip that is returned depends on the data value that the user is interacting with. So you see here I have two big KPIs, and the tooltip is different depending on whether the value of the data is above or below a particular target. So you can see here I've got different words, I've got different color, I've even got a different emoji. And the way that you accomplish this is behind the scenes, you create a different calculation for each of your different tooltip messages. And it doesn't have to be two, you can have more. But for each one, each unique message, you have a different calculation, and you put both of them or all of them on the tooltip shelf together, side by side, with no space in between. You just line them all up next to each other on the tooltip shelf. And then the real magic is in the calculation. You need to make sure that each calculation for each of your different messages is distinct from the others, meaning they're mutually exclusive. You want only one of them to ever show at a time, depending on the data. So you can see here my calculation for above target. I'm just comparing my measure, sum of sales, to my target, in this case through a parameter. And then if it is greater than or equal to that value, give me this particular message, the emoji and the met target. And yes, I know that emojis are probably not particularly common in a business setting. I wanted to show you, though, that you can use them in a tooltip. At its heart, a tooltip is basically a text editor. So it'll take emojis and Unicode and Altcode and other things that maybe you didn't even realize you could use in there. I'll show you an example a little bit later of a different type of format you can take. But this is a great technique because it gives your user a little bit more context that's very specific to the data, and just a little bit of extra work on your part to build up those calculations and format them. And then the fifth kind is adding an additional visuals to the tooltip, what we usually call Viz in Tooltip or VIT. So on the left-hand side here, I've got a stacked area chart looking at the sales for these different regions, for these different categories across time at the yearly level. But maybe I know that my user might have an interest in what does this look like at a little more finer grain. They mostly care about the annual trend, but they might be a little curious about what this looks like monthly. A really easy way to do that is just to pop that monthly breakdown chart into the tooltip. So you see here on the right, I've got that focused tooltip at the top. Here are the data values for the data point we're hovering over on the left. And then here's that additional chart. And these are pretty easy to make. I'll show you a little bit more when I get into Tableau Desktop. But basically, you have another worksheet, and you reference that worksheet from within your tooltip. Great way to add more context. I do recommend not making these too complex. If you find yourself putting multiple charts with a lot of detail, and your user is spending a lot of time in the tooltip, that's probably a good argument for it not being in the tooltip, and it should just be on your dashboard. But for a quick check of what does this trend look like monthly, as in this example, they work really great. All right, I promised you that I would also go through the dialog box so that you can maybe pick up a few tips for things you didn't even know you could do with tooltips. So this is the dialog box in its entirety. There's a lot of different things going on here. I'm going to go through the ones that I think are more self-explanatory pretty quickly, and then I'll spend a little more time on the ones that I think maybe people don't understand as well. So at the top there, you have all your text formatting options, font, size, color, etc. Those look like pretty much any word processing tool you've ever used, so we'll not go through those. There's the canvas where you actually put what your tooltip is going to be. And then here's one I don't think people use, or maybe haven't even noticed, that ruler that goes across the top underneath the text formatting. Those are tab stops to do very precise indentation. I personally don't indent my tooltips a lot, but when I do, I like to use the tab stop. Here's a really ugly, horrible example I wouldn't recommend, but just to show you how you can have these different, very clean, crisp tabs. Sometimes I will have an indentation, and if it's just a space or two, it's fine to use the space bar. But if you're trying to indent it, let's say 10 or so spaces, it's kind of obnoxious to have to make sure you hit the space bar exactly the same number of times for each line. Put a tab stop on there and put it exactly where you want that text to be so it lines up nice and clean. The red X in the upper right clears all the formatting back to the default. So if you've played around with weights and colors and whatever and you change your mind, you don't have to one by one change all those back. You can just clear the formatting. Still leaves the text alone though. This insert button is where you get to the Viz and Tooltip technique. So from there, that's where you will select the sheet or sheets that you want to put into your tooltip. I'll show you that in a little bit. And then at the very bottom, we have these 3 check boxes. So the first one is, do you want your tooltips to render at all? And sometimes the answer to that is no. There are definitely cases where you don't need a tooltip on your viz. And then right next to that is a setting that I think a lot of people tend to just leave as the default, which is the responsive show tooltips instantly. But I recommend that generally speaking, you change that to on hover. What that means is that your tooltip won't pop up unless your user actually pauses over a data point and requests the tooltip. I don't know if you've ever had this experience where you're trying to demo your dashboard to somebody, maybe in an important meeting, and you just want to bring your mouse across the screen. And if you haven't changed the setting, tooltips are popping up all over the place. And it's a little disconcerting. It's a little confusing. Whereas if you put it to hover, once you get to your destination, then you get your tooltip. Highly recommend that. It still appears pretty quickly, but that little bit of pause can make a difference in a professional presentation and a good experience for your user. And then down at the bottom, we have reset, which clears everything, text and formatting. And then the preview is really helpful because you can get a sneak peek at what your tooltip is shaping up like as you play with the formatting and things without having to close it, hover over the item, and then come back into the dialog box. It's all keeps you in the same place. But it's really these last 2 that I want to talk a bit more about. So the include command buttons option is the way that you as the developer can give your user some additional tools when they access the tooltip. So you see here at the bottom, I've got a sentence formatted tooltip, and then there's this additional gray banner across the top. Those are the command buttons. So it lets your user do things like make their own groups or sets, lets them look at the underlying data, lets them rule out some outliers. And this is a great opportunity if you've got users who are maybe a bit more analytic in mind, but they don't necessarily have the ability or the interest or the time to develop in Tableau themselves. This lets them look into the data a little bit more precisely than how you've built it, but without giving them full development capability. It also has some utility for a more general audience if you've got a data table. So here, a user can select a couple of values from that table. They don't have to be adjacent like I have in this example, but as they're selecting things, if you've left those command buttons on, they're going to get what's essentially a custom subtotal in the tooltip, which is really great if you've got multiple people using the same dashboard who maybe care about different products or different regions or different counties or whatever your dimension breakdown is in your table. Then they can see their total for themselves. Now you have to be a little cautious with this as the developer. If your measure is a rate or a percentage, then summing that up is not going to make any sense. So you'll have to decide whether it makes good sense to include the command button and have that subtotal or not. But it can be really helpful for users to just get a quick look at what is the value of that data without having to filter just to those values. They can just see it in the tooltip. And then the last one here, I think the most misunderstood or underutilized of all, is allow selection by category. And what this does is turns your tooltip into a highlighter tool for that viz and that viz only. So when you turn that on and then go into the tooltip of a viz, like you see here, these dimension values become clickable. So right here, I've clicked on the West region and all the West region data points are now highlighted. Not particularly helpful in this case because I already had my viz broken out in this panel format with my different regions. But they're all clickable. So you could try it with category. Again, not super helpful. There's still a lot of data points to try to parse through, but you're probably starting to see the value here. And where it really shines is when you get to something like subcategory. Look how much easier it is for me to compare how chairs are doing within a region or across years within a region to see that pattern just for chairs right from the viz and kind of drowns out the noise of all those data points behind it. And then I could go to a different data point and pick a different subcategory. Works really well if you're just wanting to see those patterns. Now, one downside of this tool is that users don't tend to know that it's there. But that's something that you can fix as a developer. Since you have formatting control over your tooltip, it's pretty easy to make those blue and underlined, which then mimics a URL link that people are very familiar with as being clickable. And now it looks like something they can and should click. And of course, as you use this more often in your work, the people who use your dashboard will start to know that's a thing that they can do. And then they'll know more to just try that. But a good way to start with it is just formatting and making it look clickable. And yes, you can achieve this highlighting effect by just putting a highlight action on your dashboard or using a highlighter tool. The downside of doing that is that if you've got the same dimensions throughout your dashboard, it'll apply it to everywhere. And sometimes that means your dashboard grays out. I don't know how many of you had that experience where you just wanted to highlight this one thing, but everything gets highlighted and it can be confusing. Sometimes that's what you want, but if it's not, and you really are just trying to do it for a particular viz where it makes sense, doing the highlighter tool from the tooltip is a great way to just isolate it to this particular visualization. All right, with that, I want to jump into Tableau Desktop and show you a couple additional tips and techniques, and then we will come back to this presentation. So here's my dashboard. Should look pretty similar. You've been seeing a bunch of screenshots from it in my deck. And the first thing that I want to point out, in case you didn't realize this, is that there are some tooltip things that you can set at the workbook level, and it will apply to all of your tooltips. So if you go up to Format and Workbook, there is a tooltip section over here on the left. So if you know that you want your tooltip font to be different than the rest of your workbook font, you can set that here. If you want them to be darker or lighter than the default that Tableau establishes, you can change it. Or if you're like me and think 10-point font is entirely too small, especially for the Tableau font family, go ahead and bump that up to 11 or whatever value you want, and it's going to apply to all your tooltips. One setting. So that's pretty great. The next thing I want to show you how to do, I mentioned divider lines. So sometimes if you've got some different content in your tooltip, it can be nice to just cleanly break that visually with a divider line. And you can do that with a hyphen key or an alt code or something, especially if you want a dotted line look, or maybe you don't want a line at all. You could put diamonds or emojis or whatever you wanted across there, and that works. But if you want something that's just a basic, crisp, clean line, then you can just do that really simply from a worksheet. So I always make sure I name my worksheet something really useful and intuitive. I've called this one divider. And you don't even need to bring out any data or any fields or anything onto the canvas. We're just going to use the formatting. So if you go up to the Format menu and go down to Borders, the thing you need to format is this row divider on the pane. So I'm going to make this a little chunky. I'm going to make it nice and bright pink so that we can see it when I show you in the example. And then the last thing we need to do here is set this to entire view. And there, I have built my worksheet with my divider. Then when I go back to my dashboard, I'm going to add it to this visualization. And I can do that right here from the dashboard. I'm not sure if you knew that, but if I just click on the viz that I want to edit and go up to Worksheet, I can edit the tooltip right from here. And I'm going to put my divider line in between these two lines. And here's that Insert menu I mentioned earlier. So I go to Insert and Sheets, and then Divider, the worksheet that I was just on. And then the last step that you have to do to make this work is here where you see the max height. It defaults to 300. You want to make that 9, 1 for your line and the rest to accommodate the basic padding. And then when I say OK to that, I get a hot pink straight line across my viz. Probably wouldn't use hot pink normally, but I want to make sure you could see that it's the one I just made. Super easy, just a couple of steps and you get a nice divider line. And you only have to build that once. So this same divider line worksheet, you can, as long as you want them all to look the same, you can use that in multiple tooltips. You can use it more than once in the same tooltip by copying the code. Really versatile. Build it once and use it wherever you need it. Okay, the next thing I wanted to show you is I had the screenshots earlier of this dynamic tooltip with these emojis. If emojis aren't your thing or they're not appropriate for the viz that you're building, you can use a less colorful but still effective alt code instead. So I can also edit my calculation from here. I'm not sure if you knew that, but that is up in the Analysis menu, Edit Calculated Field, and this is the above target version. So I'm going to edit that here. And here's my sum of sales greater than target. I showed you this earlier. So I'm just going to replace this emoji with Alt 30. I use this so often, I do have it memorized. Alt 30 is an up arrow, Alt 31 is a down arrow, and I get this little triangle. And then when I say OK to that, now when I hover over here, I have a triangle. So same idea, but just a little more business setting friendly. Lots of flexibility though in what you put in those tooltips. Unicode works as well. Basically, if you can copy it as a text object, it'll go into your tooltip. Okay, and then the last thing I want to share is a little bit more to do with Viz and Tooltip. So if I have a visualization like the one I showed you in my slide deck where I've got this annual breakdown and I want to give my users that a little bit additional context, I can pull in a Viz and Tooltip. So So I've already built the sheets. That's the first thing you have to do, is have your context worksheets built. So it looks a lot when it's not as a Viz and tooltip, because it's showing everything. But basically I have my category breakdown, my 3 categories, furniture, tech, and whatever the other one is. I have my region breakdown. I broke it down by year, but what I've added to this one is that month view. Then I did a similar thing where I'm still looking at it annually, but now I'm getting the percent of total across my categories. And then finally, I built this very basic map of the US and Canada and total sum of sales, not by year, not by category, just total sales, just to show you an example if you want full context. So those are created. So back to my Viz, I'm going to put this in my tooltip. So you should know how to do that now. I go up to my tooltip and I'm going to put it below my other one. And let's start with the monthly sales. I'm going to leave it as its default to start with, and let's see what happens. When I hover over a data point, it does exactly what I was hoping for. I get the monthly breakdown for this year, for this category, for this region. Perfect. If I move around a little bit, you'll see that the pattern changes because the data are changing. It's working exactly as intended. You would, of course, validate that to make sure that it's doing what you wanted, but I can tell you that it is. Great. But that's not always the case. If I instead go up here to my tooltip and change this out for my annual sales example, whoops, skip the menu, and apply that, all I get is one big bar. That is not helpful. It says 100%. It's not at all useful. It's not what I wanted. So what went wrong? Well, what Tableau is doing is it's taking all of the dimensions that this Viz, the target Viz, has in common with my Viz and tooltip, and it's sending all of those characteristics across. But I don't want it to do that. So what I need to do instead is edit this code for the Viz and tooltip. Here at the very end, it says filter for all fields. But in this case, I want to specify which fields I want filtered. So I'm going to delete this all fields part, and I'm going to tell it what it should filter for. I do want it to filter for region, and I'm going to add a comma because I do also want it to filter by year. But what I'm leaving out is category. And that means that it will no longer try to filter out category, and it will instead include all of the categories for my selected region and year, which it is filtering. And that is the Viz I was hoping for. Now I have that percent of total breakdown for each of these. So sometimes the Viz and tooltip doesn't give you exactly what you're looking for, and you might have to edit that code. And then the last example there is if I just want full context of this other map that I showed you, bring that map in. You can probably guess what it's going to do by default. It's going to break it down by region, by category, and by year. And so I only get a little sliver of my map. And that's not what I want. So again, I'm going to edit this code, and in the all fields filter part, I'm just going to take that out entirely. So now I just have empty quotations, filter, nothing. What I want you to do is show me this worksheet as I built it with nothing filtered, nothing passed through, just give me the whole thing. And yeah, that looks kind of ugly because I haven't formatted the width or anything, but you get the concept of if you want it to just bring in the entire Viz, take out all the filtering from that tooltip code. So yeah, some pretty great tips to really up your tooltip game. Almost done here. I'm just going to go back to my workbook and just a couple more things. So this one, I just showed you how to set that tooltip for the workbook. So I'm leaving these in the PowerPoint deck so that you have a reminder of them later. I've talked a couple of times now about how you can have different text formats in there. And there is the step-by-step way of how to do those divider lines so that you have that for reference later, or you could grab a screenshot right now if you are so inclined. And then finally, I want to leave you with just a couple of summary thoughts about how I approach tooltips. So the first is that I make sure that my tooltips are adding value. I never have a tooltip that gives you exactly the same information as what's in the Viz. I don't have 80,000 in a big KPI and then a tooltip that says 80,000. There's no point to that. I would just turn the tooltip off. My tooltip should be providing something additional, whether that's that sentence format to explain the Viz or bring in a percent of total if the Viz itself is about the raw number, something. My tooltip should be adding something to the conversation. And how do I know what is of value to my user? Well, I recommend using empathy. And empathy doesn't just mean feelings. It's about being aware of and understanding and being sensitive to vicariously experiencing the feelings and thoughts and experiences of other people. It's really about having that user experience mindset. Does my CEO know these data? And do they just want to get to the point? Give them a focus tooltip. Am I building this for the general public or for a group I haven't worked with before? Maybe I should use a sentence and make sure they understand what they're seeing. So thinking about what your user needs and knows or doesn't know is how you're going to help figure out what tooltips to put in there. And then the last piece, putting those together, just be really intentional about how you craft your tooltip. The defaults are not horrible unless you have a table calc, then they're pretty messy. They're not horrible, but they can be so much better. And hopefully these couple of examples I've given you of how you can structure your tooltip and how you can bring in different charts and how you can just clean them up and make them as useful as possible will give your user the best experience and hopefully the best opportunity to understand their data that you can give them. And then this will be in the slide deck for you to take a closer look at. It's an example I found out on Tableau Public. For all of the bad tooltips you might see out there, there are some great ones as well. This is a good example of sentence structure where they've got an uncommon chart type and they explain what it is that you're looking at with some additional pieces of data that are not in the viz. So I loved this one. And then you'll also have access to these additional community resources as well to continue your learning and how to have better and better tooltips. And that is my presentation for you. So hopefully everybody got at least something out of that, maybe a couple of somethings, and go forth and make good tooltips.
Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
It's really well. I actually really like the line. I never thought about doing something like that before.
Yeah.
Jen, there was a very quick question in there. Somebody was wondering what version of Tableau you are demonstrating from. What version of Tableau is that?
I think that's 2026.1 or 2025.4. I'm not up on the latest. I'm not sure why. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. So it's new-ish, but not the latest and greatest. All the things I did should not be required to have a new version. Those are all pretty standard development stuff.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you are welcome.
Thanks again, Jen. Okay, I'm going to share my screen here. Introduce our next presenter, Celia. Celia is a two-time Tableau academic ambassador, co-lead of the Austin and San Francisco Tableau user groups, and a Tableau conference speaker at both TC25 and TC26. She has worked in data for 20 plus years, has been involved with Tableau for nearly 15 years, and has recently spent the past year as a Tableau Next beta tester. Her work focuses on making analytics more accessible, practical, and career building, especially as Tableau moves towards Pulse, semantic models, and agentic analysis.
Thank you very much. And it's amazing how long you can be around a product and still pick up new things from other people. I love your presentation, Jen. That was so helpful. And thank you for that. Let me share my screen. Thank you for the introduction. Covered the high points for sure. And also the majority of the reason why I would pick Pulse to talk about, because we are, let's see, hang on one second. Let's get this screen going here. Okay. Should see a big blue screen right now, right? Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. The reason that, as Brady was saying, I spoke about Tableau Next in conference and, being a beta tester, being very aware of it is a new product, right? It's getting started. And, I spent the last decade helping people pivot into data analytics or upskill, retool, something like that. So where we're trying to jumpstart, go fast, and be relevant, be able to get back to work, make it, and often it's when there's a decision that's been made where people are having to switch from one tool to another. So there's a pain point there that I'm trying to help them move through as quickly as possible, or to lift the lid on their careers to do something new. So that's usually why there's intensity usually around the type of trainings that I've done a lot of. So I'm also working with University of San Francisco with people that are just really searching and seeking to do something new with their careers and futures. So along with that, I was eager to jump into the semantic modeling that was going to happen with Tableau Next. I'm a big fan of having good governance, but we often have it in our minds instead of on paper or any kind of institutional knowledge that's been documented. But what's going to happen with Next is, for better or for worse, is very needs it, because if we're going to train an agent to be helpful to us, it needs that information. Along that path, I started being involved with Pulse, and a lot of my clients started asking about it. And what I discovered was, and the reason I've chosen to like spend a lot of time on it this summer is incredibly responsive development team doing bi-weekly releases. And this last, if you've not looked at Pulse in the last 6-9 months, it's time for a relook, because what they've done with it, then, especially in 2026 and the winter of 25, it's really remarkable. And so I'd like to kind of give you a tour of some of my favorite features, and I have it up in the background to also show and share. Instead of having like a true presentation deck, what I have here is more closely connected to it, implementation guide. So I'll be happy to share that. I built it that way on purpose to share. And so let me go ahead and jump in here. And as I said, this is I got here on the journey of looking at all the AI tooling, and having been around Tableau as long as I have, explain data, Q&A, and then also I taught some competitor projects along the way, and so I'm very aware of like where they were with some of those sort of things, and always was very impressed with what Data Guide in particular can do. When Einstein was brand new, we were all very excited about that. A little disappointed it went away in another license, and but in any case, that sort of predictive analysis and good, solid, it's really and truly data science tooling on algorithmic thinking on the backside. I was really pleased when we started seeing that being integrated and have those sort of like extra helps, discovering root causes, looking for contributing factors being available. So again, if you've not jumped in with Data Guide, it's actually quite good, especially if in a dashboard, you'll select an outlier and then give it a chance to give you some contributing factors. I feel like the dashboard, and part of the reason that this is relevant for today is what we are up against with all the excitement around the Q&A, conversational analytics, is we'll lose the context unless we maintain solid dashboarding around it, right? So dashboarding is essential to, I think, the solutions of people having with the wisdom to make really good business decisions. Data Guide is a good tool to help you find some of the contributing factors, and also in desktop in particular will generate a viz that you can keep. In cloud, it will give you a viz you can observe and then move on. So, and if you have Pulse metrics on your cloud site and you've not used it yet, in your inside Data Guide, it will basically recommend that you jump into Pulse metrics. So from my point of view, Pulse metrics fits in this hierarchy of progressive implementations of AI-ish type toolings. It is in the middle. Now, when I first started my quest with Pulse metrics, had a customer about a year ago that was really wanting to learn more, and by December they were eager to get involved with it, and so that's when I first started like looking at it closely. Well, it's changed a lot in the last 6 months. So just presently this summer, for example, whereas I really told you previously that it was very much only about how the configuration goes, whereas this summer they've integrated a generative AI engine behind the scenes as well that I'll get to in a minute. So then, of course, we have Tableau next in the next progression of, Tableau Plus and Tableau next as the next elements in the progression of how much integration of AI tooling do we have in this family of products. So, so this deck is going to go into a lot of things for implementation. I'm going to basically focus on the 8 build step and some of my favorite features, to be fair. And just note that the reason I think Pulse is spectacular is because of its proactive and the personalization and the proactiveness. So we're looking here at, sure, it can function as a KPI, card on a dashboard, and that's one of the things that embedding this relatively new. But to push things out to people so they don't have to go hunting for it, so this, keep in mind that Pulse metrics can come to some people's inboxes as an email, all the security questions, you got to check the boxes on that, sure, into Teams, into Slack. So it's one of those delivery methods of important numbers for people that are needing to be aware and fresh on them without having to go log into a system and do other things. So this is along with subscriptions and alerts on cloud, this is a really, really good way to get that in people's hands. Now, of course, there's some prereqs to make sure that it's going to work on your site. You do have to enable it, but guess what? It is so easy to enable on a site, literally on a cloud. And as the product manager recently said to me, Pulse Metrics is a cloud app. So if you kind of organize your thinking around that, that'll help you, that'll solve for a lot of things. But it is an app that sits on Tableau Cloud. It is enabled in the regular settings there. Just a few check boxes and you're off to the races with it. The permissions on it are much stronger than you might imagine. So I'm going to talk about that from a couple points of view. There's a layering to the permissions that's also going to help with anybody who is concerned about how is this going to work? Is it going to respect what we already have in place? What about row level security? Okay, so they've really been careful to think that one through. The data sources being prepared. Now, this is always the blocker. When I've sat with customers, worked, consulted with folks in training who have data that they're trying to get going with, you've got to have the data ready to go. And I'll point out a couple of things about that. But it's and it's interesting how that in all the documentations it says no blends, no embedded in. You need a data source to point to. All right, you have to be able to identify that published data source, that file, that something on your cloud site. And then when we're talking about a big KPI, be it something we're building in a worksheet or here in Pulse Metrics, it's a number that has to be resolved. It can be a very, very complex number, but it needs to be a single number that you're then providing additional, we're going to do prior period and all that kind of stuff. But it's got to be those sort of foundational pieces have to be in place. I recently sat with somebody who was trying to do a window function inside of a Pulse metric. Well, even though it is a cloud app and it sits alongside of things on a dashboard, it's not going to have the context of the window when you're shipping it off to whoever it's being delivered to. So that's another thing that is not logically possible. So we have two parts when we're talking about Pulse metrics, and it's the definition and then the metric itself. And the metric itself would be like the card part that you'd be thinking about, which is, and there's a separation in the way that these things are organized that will help you with the implementation and how you generally think about them. Now, you do need the regular admin privileges to be able to get this started, and you also have to have access to the data. So there's the dual layer pathing of role base and resource base that all applies here. So, but we're going to define the metric, and you could start with something fairly simple, and then as you can see here, they've taken one definition and have two cards out of it. And then that may not seem so obvious, but one card or one foundational calculation can be set up so that you have a lot of derivative works out of it, and that's really useful. Partly because then we have we have the opportunity for consistency in how the numbers are being represented. So these are just the parts and pieces here. Then, like I said before, if you go into a dashboard with Pulse Metrics available and you get into Data Guide, you're going to see that it's going to recommend a Pulse metric to you, and then go on to this part. But the below here would be the part that would be where Data Guide would be picking up. And then we definitely can embed them in a dashboard. That is also new this spring, of embedding and then also having them be reactive to our filters that would be on a dashboard. So pulling them in and then into, hopefully you're using containers for that, just easier to control. And then, but you don't have to, okay, but they're like, when you have your dashboard objects bottom left on your dashboard pane, you're going to have, your containers, navigation buttons, URLs, etc. Pulse Metrics sits in that space, and it operates much the same. So in the same way that if I'm bringing in an image, I drop a box on my dashboard and then I configure it. Same thing here. I'm going to drag that Pulse Metrics dashboard object onto a dashboard, and then I'm going to configure it. And then if I need to make any edits to it afterwards as well, right? Click on the item, get the gray frame, and then your drop-down menu is going to give you what you need to go from there. So, and there's a layering of the menus there as well. So we pull it up, we would have a chance to change the display, compact or full. We get to say, do we want to have the Pulse styling, the little, rounded corners, and have it look like it's kind of raised up off the background a little bit? And then we also have the chance to either have it react to the filters that are on screen there or not. You get to choose whether or not how much of that interactivity you're going to have. And then linking it over to Tableau Pulse. And that's the actual app that where you go out of your dashboard and you interact with the page that gives the user a chance to ask additional questions. And that's another one of my spots that I really feel like is a miss, is sometimes we don't necessarily do as much with the configuration to give them, to kind of queue it up for success over there. And then you have a chance to give a link to where you can take them back. So that's another one of my favorite new features. So, and from this dialogue inside of it, so we're still in the dashboard page, it would give me the chance to even switch out the pulse metric that I had right here. And then we have a series of things that are going to be asked for us as we define one. And this is going to be our, like the 8-step piece. And I would be hard pressed to squeeze in every detail, but I wanted to go ahead and talk about a couple of my favorite pieces of this. And then just know that this deck is going to give you lots of details and things to watch out for as you potentially go through and set things up. All right. So the regular set of things you would expect are going to be important here. And this is why it says no embedded. It needs to be something you can point to in terms of the data source. Shouldn't be a big surprise. And then beyond that, one of my other very favorite features is this right here, links. And it's often empty when I sit down with somebody. And this is what makes it more user-friendly for sure. Because there was an executive group that I was with about 3 months ago, and their execs were excited about this, except for they were aggravated with, how do I get back to where I was? Well, this is how it is. So these are up to 5 links that you as the admin or the creator can go ahead and set up, and you decide where this goes. So there was a TC presentation this year that one of my favorite colleagues, Ethan Lang from Play for Data, he did, and he did a masterful job of showing it how that you can take them back to your dashboard. You can take them to, maybe they need to go to a Confluence page and review something. Maybe they need to go to file a JIRA ticket. You know, whatever that follow-up, so what, who cares, and what's next. This is your spot to make it user-friendly and like show that you thought through their workflow. And then, of course, when you're interviewing them to set it up in the first place, you need to kind of discover that. And then we have 2 places where we put in dimensions, and the second batch is where you're basically queuing them up for success with the kinds of questions that are going to be low-hanging fruit. Now, we're always bounded by what does the data contain, right? But then in the Pulse metrics page where it's interactive, this is what it's going to draw from. You can have up to 50. I can't imagine that needing being necessary, but you can have up to 50, all right? And then the final thing on this screen is the currency. As Jim was sharing her tips and tricks on how you put things side by side, and if it's positive, it's going to give the number of this message. If it's negative, it's going to give that. And neither one of them is going to produce a null value in that tooltip. I love that feature so much. I have done all manner of things to try to get display levels to show up rightly. I know we're all eager for that to come in the next generation of Tableau desktop, but this is so interesting how this does it for us, what we were looking for. When I first started using Pulse, I was really quick to like set what level of display I wanted to have, and then thinking, oh, how am I going to work this out? This will give whatever the highest level is appropriate, because it's thinking along the lines of a KPI. So if the numbers are in billions, you're going to have that. If it's in millions, do you hear what I'm saying? If it's thousands, so it's not going to give you a number that's not going to fit in your KPI card, because it's on automatic. It's going to be looking for the most sleek and trim appropriate number that it can offer there, which is kind of like backwards from how we always kept to work with things. So, all right, let me kind of like speed through some of this, because this is a lot of detail that will help you hopefully with setting things up. All right, but okay, goals have to be in the file, or you can do manuals. Okay, so the manual interface is not in that normal suite of things. You do have to access them in another spot, but you do have the choice to do it. So if you're setting a manual goal, this is more the place on the Pulse Metrics app where you would do the set a goal or threshold. and the triple dots is also where we get into edit definitions. So, but that's the dialogue for being able to do it. And the good news is that we can do it. That was new this year as well. All right. And so this is what the page, so as we add those dimensions for the insights, we're going to see an auto-generated thing to the right. It's meaning to give you a sample of what it's going to do. Now, the enhanced Ask Q&A, so this was new in February, and right now has just been released with Tableau Plus, an enhanced Q&A where that you have access to, it takes you to, if this is not enough, then you can go into the next level, and it has a ChatGPT 5.2 in the background there. So it's actually really more interactive in as much as you have the data for it and you're asking questions that line up about that. Okay, so you're getting to set sentiment. I think sentiment is one of those underappreciated, really common things that we do. Now, from a management point of view, let me go to talk about that quickly, because I think that's something that prevents people from diving in quite as deeply as they would otherwise. And that is, we have followers, and then we have metric managers, and those are separate and apart from each other. And to be able to manage a metric, I will show you in a moment. I've got it open in the background. You have to be able to have that permission on that data set as well. So it's not just do you have access to it. It has a very polite message if you don't have access. So if it's not your access thing, or that thing doesn't exist, this is the kind of friendly message you get. All right. I referenced a couple of the presentations, and I also did a little bit more of a deeper dive on the linking action, those links that you can put underneath your Pulse metric on when you leave the dashboard, you're in the Pulse metric app. You know, where are we going next? Well, there is a way to return through a menu system top left that takes you back to the home page of Cloud. Not really ideal, but you want to have a chance to send people back to something that is more meaningful. At least return them back to the dashboard they came from. Okay. The Tableau mobile widget was new in April. The filtering on dashboards was from late March. I literally didn't hear about it at all though until May. So just know that is great and really works very, very well. And then we have Paste to Gold Insights that have just come out with the Tableau Plus license that got released this summer. Like for us in our world, we just got it in the last couple of weeks. And then additionally, early June, they included a point in time kind of metric card that you can do, as opposed to always being something over time where you're doing a trend, stuff like stock or on hand or quantity, some of those things where you're checking levels. Having the point in time is going to be a good mixture of what we actually care about. The custom calendaring has improved, where they also now have fiscal as well. And then Tableau apps for Microsoft 365, one of my customers I work with the most, they're a Teams house, and they use Tableau, and they needed their Pulse metrics to be shippable over to Teams, and it's not a problem. It's actually been pretty interesting to see the integration there. I mentioned at the beginning how that this particular development team is really doing a masterful job of bi-weekly releases, and along with that, they have recognized that even though Trailhead has a good foundation there, they wanted to be able to get something to market a little closer to when it happens, so that people are able to adapt and adopt it and use it. And so they have stood up their own training that you log into your own cloud site to train with, and they provide a data set for you and lead you through that. So that has been just really, really nice. The Trailhead is solid, but it is not up to date with all the features that are contained in it now. And yeah, before you publish, I've got an implementation checklist, and let's go back over to the Pulse metric, just to the page. I have a few things to quickly share and show before I pass it off. You can have a dashboard that has all KPI cards. I've got the full and compact versions here. I've intentionally pulled some of these things together in mixtures. And let's go here. You know, be it navigation buttons or context around it, you got it. It's going to be able to do it for us. On this particular dashboard, I have intentionally put this filter top right where I am leaving my month-to-date quantity KPI out, and I'm including these two with it so that as I or my stakeholders make decisions and choices across these other charts, that the pulse metrics are also being updated alongside of it. So, and you can, there you go. So you see the change. And then all of this is clickable to go into and do more with. So click on one, and this is the app that you may or may not be familiar with, but you can see the breakdown, and it'll give a couple of things. And so these dimensions right here are where we have done that in the background, whereas these are more the core. These are the ones that where you could have, truly a great amount of them. That would be a lot, but you could. So whatever is relevant to that kind of conversation they're going to have. You'll see my links down here where this is about customer segments and customer details. And this is where I would have the chance to go back to the customer dashboard breakout, or to go back to where I came from. And I think that that's what we really need to do, is to give them a chance to go to the detail, or to at least go back to where they came from. Otherwise, they have to go up here and go back to cloud. That takes you to the home screen. That's too much clicking around. Now, the part that is brand new is with Ask, they've always had this where you could have a selection of questions that you could fill in. And as I click into that, it offers me some, whatever keywords I use in there is going to offer me more. This is the new part right here where it's going to take me to an agent who's going to be more capable to answer whatever kind of questions that it can figure out with the data that I have. So just know that, and this one has an actual agentic presence, generative AI. If you've used Claude, ChatGPT, Perplexity, this will be more akin to that kind of experience. So let's see, I wanted to show this one other part. So for those of you that have security concerns, I just wanted to end with this as well, that this is where we decide if on this data set, is anyone allowed to make a pulse metric, and who is allowed to make it. So I have to be a creator, site admin, I have to be, your explorers can publish, site admins can do a lot of this sort of setup. But then you also have to have this create permissions here on the data set. And then you can, so you hear the layering. They've made the app utilize whatever structures of permissions and access we put in place on Tableau Cloud and respect it fully. And then we have the 2 additional layers up there of who can modify this definition. And you want to make that a real selective group, because, if it's publishing those big numbers that are our ride or die kind of numbers, then you really need to make sure that if there's any modification to them, that we've really thought that out heavily or thoroughly. And then there's who can follow. And of course, following is so much more casual, although, if it's sensitive data, then that's not so, then that needs to be well thought through too. But so I'll be glad to pass this along to the team so that you can have it. There's some common questions, and then also what works and doesn't work, as well as some references here about where all this came from. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you have any questions for me, I know you guys have got a window function. There you go, Andrew. I know you got a panel right behind it, but if you ever have questions about it, I'm in community chat and would be happy to help you out with whatever you get stuck with on this. They're a really good, solid team trying to do something timely with what they're bringing to market. So I just am very impressed with that.
Thank you, Celia.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I did have one question for you, if you don't mind, real quick.
Don't mind at all.
Just curious, so there seems to be some prep work that you need to do to make sure that Pulse is giving you the right metrics and it's aligned with the right terminology that the business users understand. So my question was, how do you typically handle that? Do you set up working sessions with who you're talking to, or do you do like a template that they fill out and send to you with information? How does that work?
You've just exactly described like the last session that I've been involved in from June. There was in the same way that if you were having, if they were asking you to design a dashboard, you'd be asking them for the KPIs, right? What are your big numbers? And so like we ask them to, because we knew I was going in to talk about pulse metrics. So like, what would you like, what's your end goal and what data do you have to support it? And then and for one of them, they were not forthcoming about the window function, but that's all right. We figured it out when we were there. But you know, and I have a personal strategy philosophy, I guess. I think that some of those calculations you always want to push up as high level in the tech food chain as possible. So if you've got a big database sitting out there that can generate it for you, that's better than, otherwise we're going to push it back to Tableau or to Prep, or, you know, you hear what I'm saying there.
Yeah.
So yeah, so some of that is part of an interview and or helping them think it through before you're together, and then just walking through it becomes easy, because as long as we don't like have like access or it not turned on, but turning it on is just like check boxes, so easy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Cool. All right. Well, any other questions, feel free to drop them in the QA section. Otherwise, like Celia said, she'll keep an eye on chat, or we will also include links to Celia and Jen's LinkedIn when we do a wrap-up email of this whole meeting. So everyone on this call, feel free to connect with them, reach out, ask them more questions afterwards. In the meantime, I'm going to move along, and I'm going to add Sarah and Amanda as presenters on this meeting. They're going to join in as panelists. So give me 1 second here. Alrighty, so Sarah and Amanda, whenever you guys are ready to go on camera and unmute yourselves, we'll kick our panel off. I will start by saying we had a couple more people on this panel earlier. One just wasn't able to make it, and another one had their baby earlier than expected. So a happy surprise. So we're just going to be talking to Sarah and Amanda for today, and this panel is about their experience at the Tableau conference this year that they had attended in person. And we're going to discuss it because we want to share with the rest of the attendees here, why should you consider going to a Tableau conference? What is it like? And any other questions that everyone here on this call comes up with, feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll see if Sarah and Amanda can answer those for you on the call. And otherwise, we can always follow up later via email or LinkedIn as well. So good topic to think about with Tableau conference just ending only a couple months ago, and both of our presenters being Tableau conference presenters. So we'll get started. I guess I will start with intros for each of you and give you both the floor. So I guess, Amanda, if you want to start with a quick intro.
Yeah, so my name's Amanda. I work with Rising Tides Analytics. I've been working there for about 1.5 years now, and working with Tableau for about that same time. And yep, attended Tableau conference, and I'm excited to talk about it a little bit more.
Yeah, my name's Sarah Jennings. I've also been working with Rising Tides Analytics for about 1 year now, with Amanda and Tosh. I graduated from UW-Madison last year, and I studied data science and information systems. But it was a lot of fun to work with Tableau this past year, and kind of cap it off with going to the Tableau conference in May.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. All right, let's start with our first question. So I guess I'll start with Amanda first, follow the order. Would you each give a 30-second elevator pitch on what Tableau conference actually feels like? What's the energy in the room? Is it fun? Is it, what kind of vibes do you get as you walk into the room for someone who has not been to Tableau conference yet before?
Yeah, so the conference definitely has a very high energy. It's I would say it's kind of hard to describe until you're actually there. It's part learning, part community, and just part being around people that love data just as much as you do and we do. And this was the first conference I've ever been to. So compared to what I imagined a typical conference, or I guess a tech conference to be, it felt a lot more welcoming and hands-on than very stiff lecture heavy. It was just a lot of talking and getting to know a lot of people that love data. And I would say that this conference set the bar very high for my first conference that I went to. So yeah, a little quick one.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of that, I'd only ever been to like smaller local conferences. So this was, I mean, it was absolutely massive. Like the San Diego Convention Center is huge and there's so many people there. It's very high energy, a lot of really passionate people. And also people from like all over the world were there, which was super interesting. But yeah, I also was like, okay, I didn't just feel like sessions, lectures, but there was like even so many like Tableau decorations. There was a whole Tableau store. They had like games going on to win prizes and stuff. It was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Sounds like a lot of fun energy, a lot of hype around the conference. I've been to Tableau conference twice in person over the last handful of years, and I would agree to everything that you guys are saying with the vibes. It's people who are super excited to talk about Tableau and data, so it's a fun atmosphere. All right, my next question for you guys. What was your primary goal going into the conference? What were you hoping to get out of this, and what can people expect to get out of it if they were to attend in person?
Yeah, so I was hoping to walk away with more practical skills and getting to know Tableau a little bit more, as I've only been working for about a year at that point. So I would say I definitely came back with what I wanted out of this hands-on sessions. So I would say like those sessions are exactly what I wanted to get out of this. And if you are a beginner in Tableau like me, I would say go to those hands-on sessions because they're gonna walk you through everything, and you're able to ask questions if you have those, and just be able to go back and forth with the instructor. So
Yeah, I'd say like having like a background of like a year was a really good sweet spot because I felt like I knew a lot of Tableau having worked in it for a year. But there's also, I kind of knew what I didn't know and I knew what I wanted to focus on. So yeah, I also went in and I was like, I want to learn like tips and tricks on how to do things like faster or better or like optimizing dashboards. So those hands-on sessions, even with like functions and stuff like that, I thought were really helpful because I've been using those functions, but maybe not in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And same again with you guys. I would agree. I think 1 year was when I went to the Tableau conference for the first time for myself in person. And yeah, that's a really good starting point to have some basic knowledge going in of what do I know and being able to differentiate what you don't know yet so that you can prioritize going to those sessions. All right. I'll ask probably two more questions or so with the last few minutes that we have. I'm not sure if this one would apply to you guys or not, but for whatever you can speak to it, if anyone needs to convince their boss to get them to go, how did you have to go through that? If not, how would you recommend someone go through that? I also have some links to share. Tableau shares a lot of information about ways to convince your boss to go if you have interest in attending, but you need to get the budget for it. So we can include those in our wrap-up email as well, too, for more information on that.
Yeah, we definitely didn't have to convince our boss to go. It was something we had planned probably like 6 months in advance, so that I feel like we were pretty lucky for. I'd never really heard about it before, so that was just kind of, this is on your schedule, you guys are going. But I guess like the way you could was just I don't know, focusing on kind of the value that it brings, which I feel like a lot of the value is like that inspiration and that knowledge. Like so much of it, like I didn't really know. And I feel like leaving that conference, I was like, oh, there's so many ways I can come back to my dashboards and make those better. So I think that could be something to focus on to help convince to get you there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. And to kind of jump off of Sarah, I would also say networking if you want to meet more people around the world, pretty much because there were so many people that came. You can see their experiences, what they've done, connect with them, and see how they use Tableau too, and just make that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that. Thanks for sharing. All right, we'll go with one more question before we wrap up this panel. My last question for you is for someone debating between attending virtually versus attending in person. What are maybe one or two things that you could only get out of it if you attended in person?
I would say the first thing is you get to go to Iron Viz. I know that's virtual as well, but you don't get to see like that energy really that's in the room virtually. And overall, just the energy, I would say going to that, it makes you very excited to want to go back to your dashboards after Tableau's done and continue to improve those dashboards. And then also being in person, I feel like you can ask those questions to the presenters that you have right after their session too. So
Yeah, I think definitely the people, Iron Viz and also like data night out, like you get to talk to the people who you've seen throughout that whole day. But also I think the second thing, like if you're there virtually and like if you're watching something on one computer and like you could very easily, I feel like, get distracted by work or with an email on your other computer. But like when we were there, like our computers, we were just fully focused on listening to what the presenter had to say. You know, we had our out of offices in. And I feel like that's how you gain so much more from the conference because you're very locked in and you're just thinking of all the questions you have that you can ask the presenters or the person next to you later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like that really resonates with Brady, what you said at the very beginning of this meeting during the poll, which is just being there in person. Like you guys are saying, you're able to focus and fully be there 100% versus when you attend virtually. It's easy to miss sessions that you had originally planned on going to because, oh, this meeting comes up or a deliverable came up. And then you shift your focus from it. So if you're really trying to get the full experience out of it and really try to learn and you're trying to capitalize on that time that you have being in person, that makes a lot of sense that there's a difference there. So thank you guys. I appreciate your time. Thanks for giving us some insights. If anyone has further questions on Tableau Conference, feel free to reach out. We'll include Sarah and Amanda's LinkedIn so you can connect with them and ask them more if you're debating going next year. And with that, I will pass it back on to you, Brady. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
thank you.
I'm gonna wrap up here. Future schedule. We have obviously ours today. We'll be back again in October. Walkie Tug will be next month, and the next Madison Tug will be in person and hybrid on September 29th. And then we have our swag giveaways. Robert, are you handling that today?
I am indeed. We have, let's see, it's not letting me share my screen.
I will stop sharing mine.
Thanks. Here we go. And I've already pre-entered everybody. Whoa. Here we go. So hopefully you stayed on and we're going to give the wheel a spin. What we're giving away is a $50 gift card to the Tableau swag store, which has a variety of, oh, that was close, Silvio. So stay online for just 4 minutes. Again, we're giving away, a $50 gift certificate to the Tableau swag store. You can pick whatever you like from a variety of different office things, t-shirts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'll send you a link and so forth. So Iris S, and Silvio, if you guys could please
And
put your
yeah, Robert, they were both still on. I searched for them while you spun them, so they were both still on. So
great. Yeah. So you can either DM me if you know how to use direct messaging here in our chat system, or if you're comfortable with it, just put your email address into the regular chat. I will email you in the next 36 hours, and you'll get your gift card directly from the Tableau store vendor. So congratulations. First time winning something. Congrats, Iris. Hopefully this is a long streak of winning great and awesome stuff for you.
Thanks, Robert.
And Silvio, still here? Yep. Same thing. Please throw your email address in there. I'll check DMs right now. All right. Those are our 2 winners for today, and look forward to getting that email. I will also try to email you directly so that you know that it should be on its way. I can't guarantee that the gift certificate itself won't go into your spam folder or something, so keep an eye out for that. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Iris. Got your email